This is the 0940 GMT edition, being broadcast 8 minutes earlier than that time on Tuesday, the 13th of June 2023, under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. Now, today is the 13th of June. 60 years ago, on the 13th of June 1963, the movement defending the community in the East End of London was created. 13th of June 1963, 60 years ago. Now, that was, of course, not the first event in terms of the dynamics that have been followed and practiced since that date. But that was significant because it was remotely established. It was established in Silot, in Bangladesh, but the purpose was to defend the East End of London. And it was based on the events that were happening in Tower Hamlets in East London. It was in the borough of Stepney at that time. Here, Whitechapel was in Stepney. The Stepney became merged along with Poplar and Bethnal Green borough councils. And in April 1965, 2 years later, that is, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets was created. There had been a Tower Hamlets quite a long time ago, but it had nothing to do with the kind of formation that emerged with the creation of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council in April 1965. Physically, I was not present in Tower Hamlets in April 1965, but in every conceivable intellectual, ethical, evidential way, I was very much organizing and creating and publishing the arguments for the defense of the community in the East End of London. And this is the day, 60 years ago. It was a day that was desolate, full of anxieties and full of uncertainties. And the fact that Tower Hamlets Council for the last 60 years, well, 58 years, let's say, since April 1965, has become synonymous with the phrase deprived borough is not an accidental fact. It is a fact very much integral to the state of ethics and morality to be found in the personalities and characters of the individuals who constitute the democratic, the so-called legitimate expression of the borough of Tower Hamlets. Tower Hamlets Borough Council has, in the last 60 years, also featured in the relevant local news and sometimes beyond localities as having the borough, being the borough which has had disproportionate numbers of councillors who are crooks, elected councillors who have turned out to be crooks, declared so, by the process of the relevant judiciary. And in the case of the likes of Kumar Morshid, he escaped being prosecuted and convicted because there was a technical manipulation that Morshid came into with another counselor who agreed to go to prison, which happened. And it was the prosecutions around the so called Millennium 2000 project that was funded by the central government and was, if you like, taken over by a number of crooks and criminals. Kumar Morshid was accused as one of the criminals, but he escaped the formal tag of being a convicted criminal, as I said, because of a deal. Now, why Kumar Morshid? Because Morshid was promoted by the lying still Ken Livingston, who gave certificates falsely, untruthfully, intentionally creating a persona called Kumar Morshid and claiming that Morshid was a family relative of a boy called Quddus Ali. And this lie, or pack of lies, was broadcast during several years in the 90s, following the almost fatal attack on Quddus Ali in the commercial road. Morshid could never be a relation to Quddus Ali. The idea of Quddus Ali being a target of racist attacks in September 1993 would have not been part of the records anywhere. But for me, and the information about Quddus Ali, where he lived, where he came from, the initial information was made available to me by the now deceased former Town Hamlets councillor Shahabuddin Ahmad alias Bilal, who was not a blood relation to me, but who was related to people related to me in the Silot area. So, on those basis, Bilal addressed me as uncle, mama. And on the night of the attack on Quddus Ali, Bilal was working as a minicab driver from an address in the basement in New Road, opposite my home in New Road. And so Bilal and I spent almost the whole evening, at least 5, 6 hours, going over the details of the attack and how Quddus Ali was nearly murdered. And Bilal gave me the information, and he knew the flat in Parfait Street where Quddus Ali, his brother Atik, and his parents lived in a flat on the first floor. I then followed the whole activities by creating a very extensive representation in support of the claim that Quddus Ali was nearly murdered by racists in Commercial Road and that the BBC must broadcast the news. Belal didn't spend the time after midnight with me. He continued his minicab job and he went home in Stepney. But I then continued about, altogether, I must have made about a dozen or so extensive fax communication. Because in 1993, there was no accessible internet communication, not accessible to me anyhow. And with the clock striking at 6 o'clock in the morning, the BBC began a very significant, substantial report, which they broadcast on the radio as well as on television, based on the attack on Quddus Ali. So comprehensive and so powerful was the news coverage led by the BBC that the criminals in the so-called left, like the SWP, whom I called socialist wankers, who knew better than to directly contact me. So they started a program of diversion. And they discovered, as Ken Livingston discovered, as George Gate Galloway discovered, a thing called Kumar Morshid. And they conspired to divert attention from the very constitutional, legal, ethical, moral action that I had begun. And they wanted to divert it. Now, this is the contextual, topical, updated essay that I am doing on Quddus Ali and on the abuse by the lying Sting Livingston of a parasite called Kumar Morshid. If Morshid challenges any of the facts, let him do so publicly. Morshid lied, and Morshid lied, and Morshid lied. It's 30 calendar years since the attack on Quddus Ali. And even 30 years later, Morshid has no idea as to who Quddus Ali is. Fuck the liars. So the BBC Newsroom Southeast broadcast about a dozen or so separate items claiming that Morshid was a relation of Quddus Ali's. He never was, never could be. And I'm not even beginning to talk about Morshid, how he got hold of the restaurant in central London and the criminals he hired to evict the main owner of the restaurant. We shall be talking about all of those in due course. The London Bar Harmless Council, which is what I'm talking about beginning, was led at the time by the former councillor Abbasuddin Elias Helal. And it was Abbasuddin Elias Helal who stated on the record that he had found evidence in his position of the leader of the council that showed that the Millennial 2000 project was totally corrupted and criminal prosecution must be taken. As I said, part of the motivation for Abbasuddin Ali Salal was, of course, his personal political plans, career plans. In the little world of Tar Hamlers, Bangladeshi kind of aspect of the demography, Kumar Morshed became an additional attempted leader of the so-called Bangladeshi community. He never was. He never could be. But that's what his project was. When he entered the United Kingdom illegally and was then endorsed by the locally based Siloti speaking morons that thought that the Kumar Morshed was the new Bengali leader. And the late Ashraful Islam, Sayyid Ashraf, was put in the place of chair or a leading member of the executive of the Tar Hamlers Race Equality Council. And Morshed wrote the letter of recommendation in Ashraf Islam's kind of name, but actually for Morshed, to the Home Office. I have seen the letter that was sent from Tar Hamlers Taj. So all these corrupt activities took place in order to create a political career for Morshed at the expense of the Bangladeshis in Tar Hamlers. And the criminality was aggravated by Ken Livingstone Livingstone. Because Livingstone Livingstone, that was in the 90s. So it was years before the lobby by Ken Livingstone Livingstone for the creation of a replacement Greater London Council, which ended up by Tony Blair introducing the elected mayor post for in the name of London, which of course Ken Livingstone Livingstone succeeded in grabbing hold of for two terms. So when Ken Livingstone Livingstone was desperately looking for a native colonizable community in London, he found the lobby that was presenting the likes of Kumar Morshed as the legitimate leader of the community in Tar Hamlers. And he grabbed hold of him. But that didn't happen as visibly as it happened later, but it happened. And Morshed was being promoted by the likes of the BBC Newsroom Southeast. I created the movement for Quddus Ali, Justice for Quddus Ali. And I spent a significant amount of the year in that movement, which will be absolutely undeniable. And the millions of pounds that Quddus Ali was paid by the UK government as criminal injury compensation was due to me. I have not seen a penny, I have not gone anywhere near the penny, and I have not seen Quddus Ali since he became wealthy. Kumar Morshed collaborated with an Indian evil shitbag, solicitor. This cunt boy collaborated with the Morshed and SWP Wankers constantly to divert attention from the direction that I was taking the movement to. It was because of the combined criminality of this shit called Raju Bhatt, soul cheater, cunt, Indian cunt Raju Bhatt, and the SWP Wankers, both using Kumar Morshed, and Kumar Morshed gleefully complying with them, that they fucked up the almost near prosecution of the attackers of Quddus Ali. Again, the details item by item I shall be updating on in due course. So this is 13th of June 1963, 60 years. And the movement defending the community in the East End of London was founded by me 60 years ago. Where the fuck was Kumar Morshed 60 years ago, the fucker? How dared the criminal agree to be called a relation to Quddus Ali? My extended family, part of the wider biological family, Insilot, created the Bangladeshi community kind of appearance or personality or profile starting in the 1920s, 100 years ago. Who the fuck is Kumar Morshed? And yet Ken Lyings to Livingstone cultivated, used him as a tool, and Morshed was duly exposed as linked with Ken Lyings to Livingstone. And then when Ken Lyings to Livingstone's use and abuse of Kumar Morshed as a Tar Hamlets based Bengali ran its course and it wasn't going anywhere. Morshed then joined the hocus pocus, pretense fashion, the phantom organization called the Respect to facilitate the rehabilitation into the UK House of Commons of the opportunistic creep George Gate Galloway. And Galloway gave Morshed several platforms. And they fucked up, they messed up. They did not amount to anything. So, for the years that Galloway operated in Tower Hamlets, the likes of Morshed kind of floated about. What the fuck did they think they were doing? All the mental slaves among the Silotis have been exposed for their mental slavery. And our campaign, the movement defending the community in the East End of London, is the one that has remained intact. Why? Not because any grant money was available. We never sought any grant money. We never would. As for me, being the great grandson of the Vedh Shah, I would never, I would never go anywhere near charity money for running anything. I never have done. It is my Vedh Shah legacy, which is to do the moral, the ethical thing for its own purpose. Do the moral thing, the ethical thing. If I pay the minicab driver the money for the journey because I'm having to go to destination X by a minicab because of time factor, let's say, or the factor of accessibility, and I'm going there to help somebody survive some vicious attack on them, and then that person contributes to the payment of the fare of the minicab. That doesn't mean I'm taking anyone's money. The fact that I'm giving the time itself is beyond pricing. So the time that I spend, this time, I 60, let's say, criteria. The UK public was billed for providing Boris Johnson with the government paid lawyers. The rate at which, let's say, David Pennick used to be Queen's Counsel, now King's Counsel, the rate at which David Pennick charges, Mike Mansfield charges, that rate would be very high compared to the average licensed law trader. But even if they do charge that kind of amount, it doesn't necessarily follow that they are charging amounts to their delivering the result, the outcome. It doesn't. And as the congenital liar Boris Johnson has produced, proved time and again, even when he was appearing before the House of Commons, London House of Commons privileges, is it? Select committee, was it? Inquiry. David Pennick, you could see the video, you can still see the video. David Pennick sitting to Johnson's right was physically looking sick. At the display of stupidity, idiocy on the part of the congenital liar, the dishonest Boris Johnson, the crook. So Pennick may have been paid. Nobody knows because the actual amount paid to him on account of Boris Johnson has not been published to my knowledge, not up to this stage anyway. Whatever he has been paid has been substantial. And going by the evidence published about Mike Mansfield's appearance at various inquiries, including the Northern Ireland inquiries, these licensed law traders are paid millions of pounds. That has to be considered against the actual outcome. As outcomes go. And for example, Mike Mansfield also appeared in the aftermath of the murder by the London Metropolitan Police of the innocent Brazilian commuter. And he also appeared, this Mike Mansfield. Part of the way he engineered himself into the scene, and he started to get himself the central spot, allegedly campaigning for the rights of or for justice for Stephen Lawrence. But as things stand now, as Stephen Lawrence's mom, Doreen, has repeatedly said, the Metropolitan Police have not been held to account, and this is again 30 years since Stephen Lawrence was murdered. The Metropolitan Police have not been held to account for the murder of our son Stephen. What I'm saying that in the context of in relation to is the work that I've been doing constitutional law advocacy, and I've been producing outcome. Now, if any of these people that I have been helping were to pay me, they would definitely have to be paying me at the rates of the combined average that can be worked out by looking at the rates charged by David Penick, Mike Mansfield, et al. And they would not come anywhere near being sufficient payments for me if outcome is to be judged. So the Vedh Shah, who was the original professor, the original philanthropist, official saint, original saint in the village of Sandarpur, to the east of river Kuyara in Silot. He lived more than 100 years ago, and he traveled the world, and he actually stayed in the village for part of the year or parts of the times. And when he would return to the village, there would be flocks of people, any number of people coming, turning up, seeking his advice and support and wisdom. And according to the account that my paternal grandmother gave me of him, nobody who came so seeking the Vedh Shah's help was left without any help, without success, without comfort, and they all were genuinely grateful, and they offered him material return, tokens of gratitude. So, according to Tayyabun Nasa, my maternal grandmother, who witnessed these as a young woman, if the Vedh Shah accepted any of these people's offers, then he would be able to use the money that they would were willing to happily willing to provide. He would be able to buy the entire visible land within sight from our home. But he said no, he did not accept any money. He did not accept any goods, anything in return. So the saying in Islam is fi sabilillah. He was doing it fi sabilillah. And my grandmother Tayyibun Nasa said to me, addressing me, that you are like him. Of course, I wasn't there when he was alive, but she knew him and she knew me. And I took her word for it. And so, therefore, I have not done anything, and I shall never do anything that actually amounts to my taking money in return for the good that I do. When my father organized the day long seminar of scholars, when I was too young to have a name, and that seminar was organized in order to decide what name they accept these linguists and scholars means one who tells the truth, upholds the truth. Constituting that is Zahir al Haq. Zahir is to publish, publicize, declare, uphold. So that's the core of my name. And my grandmother later described, added the Shah to the names of all the males in the family in recognition of the Vedh Shah. So there is a Shah at the beginning of my name, and my central name is Zahir al Haq. Arabic conjunction, it applies to the Persian as well. So the name, the scholars decided on the name without being briefed about the Vedh Shah. But it so happened that legacy. So when I say to the likes of Kumar more shit that they have lied and they must withdraw their lies and lying, I say that with the knowledge of all these, with the evidence of all these. When I confronted, without any plan, when I confronted the late Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in the 1960s at the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka, I had no idea. I had no idea how this exchange would end. I had no idea that the number of questions that I would have to ask the late Zulfikar Ali Bhutto at the Institute of Engineers, would even be nine, would even be two or three. I thought I would have asked the first and only question to him, and I would leave him to expand on the answer, deliver the answer which he didn't. Well, he couldn't. It's the same thing that happened when I questioned the then Indian Prime Minister, Morarji Desai, about the second decade, 10 years later, in London. And Desai couldn't answer my question that I put to him in the Strand in London, not far from the Royal Courts of Justice, so called. I did ask 100 questions during 4 days, I think, and I addressed them to Ziaur Rahman. And unlike Morarji Desai or Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, Ziaur Rahman actually answered my questions. Whether I agreed with the answers is not the main part of it. Ziaur Rahman, face to face, showed to me that at a personal level he was straightforward and had the moral integrity to face the questions. Now, I heard later that Ziaur Rahman was guilty of many things after he was assassinated, but I have no idea as to what crimes or offenses he committed or what conspiracies he was part of. But as far as my week asking him questions in London and his answers, I think Ziaur Rahman was exceptionally courageous as compared to the others who held the positions. The Behaya, Irshad, who completely fucked up his name by rearranging it Hussein Irshad. Fuck him! In the nomenclature, in the subcontinent, there is no such thing as Hussein Irshad, you fucking liar. It shows his ignorance and illiteracy as well. Irshad Hussain was a mental slave, shameless mental slave. Whereas Ziaur Rahman, he literally was sweating when he was being questioned by me. But despite the fact that he was sweating and he was in military uniform all the time, Ziaur Rahman never refused to answer a single one of the questions that I put to him over a period of the whole week. It is completely embarrassing for the whole of the people who benefited from the name of Ziaur Rahman that after he was assassinated, they allowed the character assassination of Ziaur Rahman to take place without any challenge. My experience is very limited to those 4 days. But based on those 4 days, I would say that Ziaur Rahman, as a person representing demographically the people of Bangladesh, courageous, and had the confidence of respecting the people. What happened during the declaration of the commencement of the engagement with against the Pakistan army that he had previously belonged to? I don't know because I wasn't there. But as I say, if I can summarize Ziaur Rahman to his behavior on those 4 days, I would say that he was, quite apart from all the other encounters he may have had with other people, Ziaur Rahman was very straight. And he invited me, of course, 3 years later, he invited me to go to Bangladesh. And my reading of the circumstances was that he would have offered me something like a position in his government. Of course, that was not the first time that I had been offered a position by any government. But I, of course, didn't go because that is not my purpose. So before I met him, on the occasion that he invited me to go to Bangladesh, I had written the unique pamphlet marking his arrival to Brick Lane, I mean, the coming arrival. And I'm confident that that is unique and that remains a unique piece of objective literature celebrating the Bangladeshis in the UK as well as recognizing Ziaur Rahman. I didn't praise him. Anyone who has read that would see that I have not praised Ziaur Rahman. I merely observed, by following the international standards of objective journalism, that he was a steward. I used the word steward. I didn't even call him leader. Now compare what I wrote about Ziaur Rahman in that pamphlet with the corrupt literature produced by the sycophant Kaana, I went to the events, political events, all the public political events, and the only time that I went to his residence, Sheikh Mujib's residence, was on the 6th of September 1970, 32 Dhanmondi. And on that occasion, I was there with four other people. All of them are journalists. Didn't see anything, didn't hear anything of any profundity from Sheikh Mujib at all. So why do the people keep saying things about him that simply are not true? Because it was a personal ambition on his part as against the ambition of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto to become the leader of Pakistan. that resulted in the events of 1971. Because had Bhutto not insisted on becoming the leader of the country after the December 1970 election, had he not insisted, then Sheikh Mujib would have been the Prime Minister of Pakistan. And Sheikh Mujib wanted to be the Prime Minister of Pakistan. What would he have done? To this day, there is no answer to that question because all the accounts about what happened and what would have happened have been based on a denial of the truth, because everyone who has been writing the stuff has had a brief to make up things. Why am I saying they have had a brief to make up things? The answer is in the actual contents of what they have been writing. Start with Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry. As I said, in the piece that he wrote in the Purbodesh, published and owned by Hamidullah Chaudhry from Noakhali, Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry completely openly criticized Sheikh Mujib as an anti-democrat and the Awami League as an anti-democratic organization. That was as far as late as 1970. How then did the same person become not only a fan of the same person, Sheikh Mujib, but one whom the Sheikh Mujib had treated among human beings without a reason, and there has to be reason, and there was no reason because nobody who observed Sheikh Mujib politically has any recollection whatsoever of Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry being anywhere near Sheikh Mujib politically. Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry was a parasite. He was a hired writer. So when I was observing and writing and publishing in 1970, Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry was working for Maulana Akram Khan on his daily Azad, the daily independence or independent Bangla language newspaper. And Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry wrote a column. One of his columns he dedicated to attacking a man from his same area in then East Pakistan, Barishal, known as Akhtar Farooq. Now, Akhtar Farooq has the skin color, very deep black skin color. And Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry mocked Akhtar Farooq's skin color, made fun of it, ridiculed it, and used Akhtar Farooq's black skin color as if it was a fault or defect on the part of Akhtar Farooq. Now, that is such a deeply personally offensive an insulting attitude that it will take a whole essay length diagnosis to get across. Suffice to say that he called his column, Abdul Kufar Chaudhry called that column that he dedicated in launching his attack on Akhtar Farooq. He called him Dear Black Writer. Now, by black, he didn't mean black in the sense that we understand it in the context of Europe. He meant that he was black in the dark kind of, in a negative sense. Dear black skinned writer. Before he became editor of the rival newspaper that Abdul Kufar Chaudhry was attacking, Kalamunshi was a college lecturer or academic, and he had a reputation among at least those people who knew him. I didn't know him at that time. He had a reputation of being, in the sense of the Western journalists or journalism, as a humorist. And when I recall some of the events that Akhtar Farooq addressed, public events where he spoke as a designated speaker, I remember the feeling that he was, to put it quite unhesitatingly, he was witty. That could not be said about his contemporaries in Bangladesh or in East Pakistan at the time. So, although Abdul Kufar Chaudhry attacked him viciously by using mean phrases and words, Akhtar Farooq replied in his column dedicated in responding to Abdul Kufar Chaudhry in a way that made his response an enlightening one. And so this continued for a period, I think. The two of them exchanged comments about one another, against one another. Now, all the contemporaries that know or have known Abdul Kufar Chaudhry would agree on one thing, that Abdul Kufar Chaudhry, was personally a very mean, very needy, very greedy, a very dependent individual. His only mentionable aspect being that he was one of the contemporary writers with significant following. But that did not make him a person of good character whatsoever. But back to Farooq, that would exceed the permitted limits of my permission to him to address me in the way that I deserved. So Akhtar Farooq knew better than to give me any orders whatsoever. And as I said, over the coverage I think about 5 or 6 major pieces for the same day's newspaper, for the same day's events. And what I wrote remains unique because I wrote, according to others, in other newspapers, I wrote uniquely the brilliant pieces. And one of the pieces I had written was about the man I called Haqqu Islam. That was my editing of his name, AQM Shafiqul Islam. Now, AQM Shafiqul Islam was a cousin, sorry, an uncle to the Jamaat Islami man Ghulam Azam. And Haqqu Islam belonged to another faction of the Muslim League. Haqqu Islam wrongly thought that he could come to the office of the newspaper and order the editor to make me apologize to him because I had not given him, Haqqu Islam, any credit as a speaker at the day's events the following day, the previous day. So Akhtar Farooq requested me to go to his office, which I did. And when I arrived at the office, I saw this Haqqu Islam sitting there. And then Akhtar Farooq said, our guest has this question for you. And Akhtar Farooq called me Zahir because he was older than me, so he could say, call me Zahir. And I listened to Haqqu Islam. And as I said before, I mean, in Dhaka, I didn't speak in Bengali. I'm a Bengali scholar, but I refused to speak Bengali because of the antipathy to Silotis that the Bengalis have. So that is my personal position. So I spoke in English, although I was writing in Bengali, for example, for that particular publication. So he said that he deserved a proper mention as one of the leading speakers at the previous day's events. And I said, well, I didn't think that you were. And the fact that I didn't think you were is in the contents of what I wrote. I didn't write about you because you didn't deserve to be mentioned as a leading speaker. And then I said words to the effect that you can now get lost. And I left the room. That's it. I had similar encounters with various other individuals based simply on the principle I don't give a fuck about any money or about a position. I am dedicated to telling the truth, and that's it. No fucker anywhere has bought my cooperation to write something that I don't want to write, to say something that I don't want to say. And that is the position. So, where I shall end this particular edition is before taking into account the goings on between the congenital liar Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and all the other things, which I shall be covering hopefully in the next edition. One hour, and it's coming to an end at 10:36 GMT.